Matt Orman. Your life, your stories.
This is BBC Radio Oxford.
And just over 10 minutes, Debbie McGee is going to be on the programme. But let's have a Royal Butler on right now. Do you know when you can wear a hat indoors? When you should stand up for a lady, or which side of the pavement you should be walking on? Now, as a Royal Butler, these are just some of the things that you are expected to know. Not to mention catering for the every need of your family and being as discreet as possible. Now, Grant Harold has been a member of the royal household of their Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall, and runs his own Butler School. He spoke to me a little earlier and let me in on some secrets from this mysterious world.
I feel very lucky that when I was much younger, a few years ago, I had a kind of dream or an ambition to actually one day work for the royal family, or as my father reminds me, I think I said, how do you marry into the royal family? So you can tell I had quite high high dreams, high hopes. As a child, the adults kind of, quite rightly, they support you, but at the same time, they kind of think, is that going to actually one day happen? And for me, it wasn't if, it was when. And I was absolutely certain that one day I would be serving the Queen and looking after her family. And, of course, there was a few years passed in between that, and I obviously got the job as a trainee butler for a family in Scotland. That then led to working at the quite well-known Woburn Abbey for the Marquess and Marchioness of Tavistock, who were at the time. And then that then led on to hearing that the Prince of Wales was looking for a butler, and I applied, and after quite a few months of interviews, because it's quite a strict process, I eventually got to meet him, and luckily he liked me, and I got offered a position with him.
What sort of things do you have to do? I mean, that interview process sounds very rigorous, but what sort of things do you have to do throughout it?
Because we've got to be careful, because we live in a time today when you don't really know who people are. I know we've got, there's a lot more out there, there's a lot on social media, but bear in mind, we're talking about in the early 2000s when it wasn't, there wasn't as much information out there about people. So of course they've got to be careful, they've got to kind of do background checks, security checks, because you are going to have one-to-one contact, and that's very much what initially, for me, I remember for the first year, kind of pinching myself, because you are with them, you're obviously doing things with them, you're travelling with them, you're looking after them. The same as any butler would do for anyone. I mean, that's the other thing. I say to people, it's not suddenly it's any different. Of course, it's obviously probably the most famous people in the world, but at the same time, it is like a butler's job. It's like looking after anyone. So it's the same kind of day-to-day tasks of running homes and serving meals and that kind of thing. So, the job of a butler, it doesn't change from really that much from one person to the next. It is just the fact that they are so well known, and you do feel, I felt really honoured, especially on occasions when I was with the Queen, for example, on her 80th birthday, actually serving her and thinking, this is historically such an amazing thing for me, because I'll always be able to tell people in years to come that on her 80th I was actually there and I was actually serving her.
That is incredible, isn't it? What a memory to have. What did she have on her 80th birthday? What were you serving her?
Hand on heart, I can't actually remember. It's so long ago, and there've been so many meals since then. But I actually think, if anybody listening actually really wants to know, I think actually online there was actually copies of the menu. If you obviously look up the Queen's 80th birthday, there is actually copies of the menu, and I'm pretty sure, and it's a guess, but of course we all know that the Queen loves her fish, so you can probably guarantee there'll be a fish somewhere in there.
Some Dover sole, perhaps, like you say. She does love. She loves her grouse. She loves her grouse as well.
Well, see, the interesting thing is, I don't remember, there was a documentary on, I want to say last year, and it kind of gave you, no, actually it wasn't last year, it was a couple of years ago, and it gave you a kind of behind-the-scenes look at the kind of dietary, because obviously, as a butler, I don't really want to go into exactly what they have, because it wouldn't be very fair to say to people, this is exactly what they have. But there is actually documentaries out there, and you actually get to see not only what they have, you actually get to see it getting prepared. And it's really interesting, because I think it kind of gives people an insight into them, which they probably didn't realise. And as I always say to people, but they are very down to earth, and they're not going to have things that are any different to what you and me might have.
Now, I would dread the soup course, I think, if I was a royal butler. Did you ever spill soup on the Queen?
Luckily, no. Luckily, I've never spilt soup on anyone, thankfully. I shouldn't say this, should I? Because now it's going to happen. I'll have somebody come round to dinner to my house, and the soup will be all over them. But no, luckily, I've always had quite a steady hand. And I'm not saying that I didn't, especially when I was younger, I used to get quite nervous when I first started butlering, because those are the things you don't want to do. You don't want to spill the soup, you don't want to spill the coffee, you don't want to trip over anything. And I don't know if you've ever seen the wonderful black and white Dinner for One, kind of comedy sketch, I want to say from probably the 60s, if not the 50s, and it's hysterical because there's a butler in that, and every time he goes and says something, he trips over a lion that's on the obviously on the floor of the carpet, and it's hysterical because that in my head I kept thinking, if I ever go to a house and I see anything like that on the floor, I'm going to make sure I avoid it. And luckily, I've never come across anything like that yet.
What's it like, Grant, though, to be around the Queen, and the royal family, in fact? I mean, everywhere you turn, there's a very familiar face. What's it like to be amongst that?
As I said, you feel really honoured. I know it might sound a bit of a kind of obvious thing to say, but you do, because, again, I remember another example. I was in Wales, and the Royal train was coming into Wales, and I was obviously there waiting for the Queen and Prince of Wales to arrive. And I remember there was a chap, he was one of the, I think he's a station master or something, and he was obviously, no, he wasn't a station master because he was actually junior, because he didn't quite know who was on the train. And as the train came in, he suddenly saw, obviously there was a lot of, there was press and there was people waiting and everything. And of course, then he turned round, because I think he'd just come on duty, and he said, well, who is this? And I said, it's the Queen. And he got so excited. It was extraordinary. And he's going, I'm going to see the Queen. I'm actually going to see the Queen. And I'm going, yes, if you stand there, she's going to come off and you'll see her. And he was so excited. And that's when I kind of thought to myself, God, I'm really lucky. I don't get to see her. I get to talk to her, and he was so excited. And that's quite magical when somebody has that wonderful influence on a chap who probably is in his 50s, obviously huge respects the Queen and the royal family, and to see him get that excited was magical.
So when you talk to the Queen, what sort of things do you talk about?
Well, obviously, as a butler, you talk to her about day-to-day things. Remember, I wasn't actually her butler. It was only if I was actually with the Prince, or if I was actually doing something that the Queen was there, and also it gave me a chance to speak to her. It was very rare if it would be anything to do with actual, obviously, work stuff. It was more, believe it or not, it was more maybe on a social side, because I used to get invited to the ball, the girlies' ball. I used to get invited to the garden parties, and of course I got the opportunity to talk to her, because obviously she knew me, and even on one occasion I got to dance with her in Scotland at the girlies' ball, which for me, do you remember earlier on when I said as a child I had this ambition? The part of the ambition was I watched a documentary called Elizabeth, I think it was Elizabeth R, and there was a scene of the girlies' ball, and I remember thinking, I'm going to do that. One day I'm going to be there, and I'm going to dance at that. And I remember again my parents saying that just doesn't happen. And however many years later, 20 odd years later, there I am in that ballroom with the Queen and other members of the royal family dancing, and obviously did a reel with the Queen, and also got to dance with the Duchess of Cornwall. And again, it's something. When it was finished, I remember actually phoning my parents and saying, "You're never going to believe this, but do you remember how many years ago I said I was going to do this? I've just done it." And it's great. And again, those kind of bits of inspiration, I say to, because I obviously teach etiquette and I train butlers, and I say to children of the schools that I go to, if you've got a dream or ambition, however crazy it might seem, and obviously we should listen to our parents, but however crazy it might seem, never give up on it. If it's something you really, really want, I'm a huge believer that we can make it happen.
That's great advice. But going back to dancing with the Queen and the royals, what's the protocol? I mean, are you allowed to sort of grab the Queen and spin her around?
No. Well, yes. I mean, if that's the dance, then that's obviously what happens. But she is an excellent dancer. She's obviously done it for many, 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 many years, and it's great because well, you have to make sure you know what you're doing. That's the important bit. I actually took some secret dancing lessons just in case that I did actually get asked to dance, because the thing is, it's also quick and everything is, it's beautifully done, and everyone's very smartly dressed, and there's a live band, Scottish band and everything. So there's no time to kind of start making mistakes or getting anything wrong. And also, when you are dancing with a member of the royal family, for example, even when I was dancing with the Duchess of Cornwall, people obviously watch. It's a bit like a scene out of The King and I, where people kind of, you just get people kind of watching you, and it's very nerve-wracking because, again, you don't want to put a foot wrong, otherwise people would notice. So it's quite a lot of pressure, but as I say, it's more so for people like myself who maybe don't often get to do something like that.
So, 91 today. You were there, like you said, at her 80th birthday. How might she be celebrating privately with her family today?
Looking back on previous years, from what I kind of have known of the Queen and also what we see in the public, she's very private when it comes to her birthday, and she normally spends it as a private occasion. Because remember, she's got obviously her official birthday in June, and that's really when she kind of celebrates with the public with the Trooping of the Colour. So obviously this is more of a private kind of affair, private day for her, which I completely understand, because I think, like most of us, when it's your birthday, what you want to do is just kind of have a relaxed time with your family. Yes, just have hopefully a quiet day. But I say that, but of course there has been days on her birthday when she's ended up having to do duties and things. So she is quite amazing I think she's amazing how she just keeps going and a huge inspiration to not just that generation, but hopefully to the younger generation as well.
There's all sorts of speculation, isn't there, sort of in the papers about, what the Queen eats. I mean, we understand that, she likes her Special K. That's sort of her favourite cereal, sort of most mornings. And there's also a story about the fact that she's always got a chocolate sponge biscuit or something.
Oh, chocolate sponge biscuit cake.
Yes. Is that true? It's never sort of too far away from her.
No, again, I think there was that documentary. It kind of talks about the jam pennies and the chocolate biscuit cake, which are a kind of a favourite. In fact, it's quite a famous royal cake, because it's something that the royals apparently request when it is birthdays and things. And it's quite nice that they've got these kind of traditions that they like to kind of keep. And I don't know if you've tried a jam penny, but I have actually been at an event where there was actually a royal chef there, and he did make jam pennies, and they're really, really nice actually.
So what do they look like? Because I know that she likes her jam sandwiches, but the jam penny, what's that?
They're round. They're actually round shape. So they're not the kind of traditional afternoon tea finger sandwiches. They're cut in little round, kind of 2 penny size. They're really nice. And of course they've got the jam in them. They're very easy to eat. They're very light. Yes, I quite like them.
I'm never going to have my sandwiches any other way again. Quite
right.
frankly, yes. So you run a butler school now, Grant. So you're training, other butlers that may go and fill those kind of that kind of post that you did for the royals in the future.
Well, they do. I mean, what's really exciting is not just our royal family. There's obviously, luckily, there's a few royal families still around the globe. I say we because it's my team, train butlers that either come from those households that want to kind of get the level of service higher, or it might be people that have suddenly, they work in the local post office and they suddenly go, do you know what? I've seen Downton Abbey, I'm an admirer of the royal family and aristocracy, I want to be a butler. And they seriously, they get in touch and they'll say, look, I'm wanting to do a career change, and they get in touch. And what's really nice is, obviously it's relatively local. Blenheim Palace has become the kind of home for this school, Blenheim and Thornbury Castle, which is over in Bristol. And the two of them obviously got beautiful they've got wonderful history. Henry VIII, obviously, and Duke of Buckingham had Thornbury Castle, and obviously Dukes of Marlborough for 300 years have been at Blenheim Palace. And both of them, obviously one being a palace, one being a castle, it gives them that kind of insight into what it's like to be in those kind of places, and they do get to go behind the scenes. So it's not just a case of being in a classroom. We actually encourage them to actually go into the actual private rooms and actually do things, and they love it. And we run those courses, if I can say, we do run them a couple of times a year, and we've actually got one coming up in May, which again I think people are kind of quite excited to kind of get to join it, just to kind of get that kind of behind the scenes and actually understand what goes on. And I say some of them maybe don't want to go on to be butlers. They're maybe just inquisitive and actually just want to do the course. And I've even had people that are thinking of taking butlers on who will do the course themselves because they want to know exactly what their butler should be doing.
That's Royal Butler Grant Harold, who's been a member of the royal household of their Royal Highnesses, the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall, and runs his own butler school now. And he served Her Majesty the Queen from working for the Prince of Wales and his wife. Doing this, of course, it's the Queen's birthday. Happy birthday, ma'am.